almost a decade ago, I lost my partner quite tragically. I can't trust anyone because even if I'm in a trusting relationship with a friend or a family member, eventually over time that relationship changes and the trust has changed also.
Everyone acknowledges the pain, the trauma that we can go through, in relationships, but very little on how that can shape us.
There's connection, and with that comes vulnerability. And I can hear that tension of going, I want connection, but this vulnerability is really risky.
People aren't loyal to you, they're loyal to their values, or they're loyal to how a relationship with you supports their values. Greg, how are you?
I'm good, thanks, mate. Yeah, looking forward to today. We're caravanning at the moment, family of 5, and what I hope wouldn't happen has happened. We've got a leak in the caravan, so that's getting fixed, the front windows, and then we'll be back on the road. Yeah,
mate. The audience loves the caravan updates. Myself too. I think I told you when you actually popped around to our house a week or so back. You showed my kids, what the operation you were running, which they loved, by the way. Thank you for that. And then my fiance Krista said, like, man, love what they're doing. Yeah. But shit, I couldn't do that.
I'm happy for that. Yeah, I get those comments. Yeah, I'm happy for you. Yeah.
Yeah.
And just to be clear, we didn't get bumped out of home. We're road tripping around the South Island. We have a place, but we've Airbnb'd our place. So we're trying to do this. It's carnage and it's fun at the same time with a new way of doing home.
Yeah. Important distinction. Yeah. Not kicked out.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. A little bit of a being the whole me. Showing up as a whole person, as we talk about. Little bit on this morning. Ironically, in the spirit of homes and movement. I think we were just saying off camera. My fiance I think we might have found the dream home. We're blessed that we do have a nice family home, but as I've said, we've had some additional children recently, and so on. And so we're needing a bigger house, another bedroom, etc. So literally the other day, searching Trade Me, find the house that you love, and of course, deadline sale in 2 weeks. So a lot of
paperwork, admin, pulling it all together,
needing to be done this morning. So I'm thinking, great, I'll have a coffee. I'll think, great, get in the flow of the show. We're going to film some episodes. And then, no, I'm at the bank. I'm dealing with the agent. So arguably a good problem to have, but I'm glad to be here. All right, Jamie, let's get straight into it, please. What question and caller, please, do we have for us today?
Yeah, today we have Indy, and Indy asks, why can't I trust people after losing someone I loved?
Wow. Okay. Greg, what comes to mind for me first is, and obviously we'll need to hear the audio, a bit more context, losing a loved one, relationship, and what that looked like for Indy. But I know that, one thing that work a lot with relationship dynamics, and also, I think we all know someone who has, maybe they've been through a breakup, they've had, they've perceived they've been heartbroken, etc. And I think everyone acknowledges the pain, the trauma that we can go through, in relationships, but very little on how that can shape us, right? Very little, in fact, in terms of how that may shape our behavior or our patterns. I think it's, we speak about ownership on this show and looking at, what is our part in a dynamic and what are the unconscious dynamics or unconscious benefits, that we might be getting out of staying in a certain pattern or unknowingly staying stuck. And I think in this context specifically, my initial thought is how easy is it again to, and again, I'm sure we all know people like this. Every person I go out with is a narcissist. Incredibly easy to say, they're the problem, not me, etc. And maybe there's some truth in that, right? Maybe there's two sides to it. But perhaps if we have gone through past relationship pain, loss, trauma, or whatever that looks like for the listeners or the audience, putting a bit of a time to look at how may those past experiences and relationships and pain, how may that be shaping how we show up to our new relationships, right? Personal, professional, or intimate?
Mm. Yeah, it's a big question. I mean, I naturally, with looking at it, break it into those two parts. Why can't I trust people? And I think trust is a huge thing for all of us. Like we're wired relationally. We want to trust, and I think we can, whether it's through some trauma or whether it's just through life. I think even in a lot of the Western way that we do life, that being an independent for a male might be the sort of James Bond kind of I don't need anyone.
Mm.
The whether it's health, wealth, relationships, I can just do everything independently. That
Yeah.
can be epitomized as the goal.
Yeah.
Like that you can be self-reliant.
Mm.
So I think trust is a really interesting one.
Well, it's very easy, just to jump in there, mate. I mean, it's very easy to, on the show we talk about that sometimes we're looking for the middle ground, right? It's very easy to take maybe something that has value or beneficial, like independence, say, or taking ownership and being a leader of our own life, or not being overly reliant on others. Those that has value, of course, that's beneficial. But oftentimes we can take anything to either extreme, right? From this, safety or seeking perspective, right? And this, infatuation there. So I think it's a great question to be able to look at, in all areas, right? Our relationships and perhaps how we can be more authentic, because frankly, again, our past experiences in all areas will shape us. And how relevant are relationships? Again, personal, professional.
Totally. Yeah. And so the second part of the question that, with having lose a loved one, incredibly challenging, no doubt. And then I've already said it, but the way that different events shape us, both consciously and unconsciously, for the way we protect ourselves or have repeating patterns in the future. I've done a bunch of work on different things going, why is this repeating pattern showing up in my life? And you can trace it back to certain things where maybe you picked up a core belief that you told yourself and you said, from now on, I will, or I won't, or whatever things look like. So yeah, really interesting. I'm sure really relatable topic.
Yeah.
Especially because it's relational in nature for the listeners. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Jamie, can we hear the voice note? Let's hear a bit more about Indy's story and how we can help.
Hi, Hayden. My name is Indy. So, about almost a decade ago, I lost my partner quite tragically while I was pregnant. And obviously, that was like quite an experience in itself. And I've done a lot of work and I've done a lot of things since then. And my son is healthy and he's cool and he's fine and we're good. So I have experienced too many situations where people have wanted to care for me, um, make me a part of their lives. They say things like, "Let me know if there's anything I can do. Um, let me know if I can help in any way. Come be a part of our friends. You're welcome. Come this, that, and this." To the point where like it's just words and there's no actions. Like, and it's happened too many times and it's become so hurtful, especially from a person that's had to rebuild their life in a place they don't belong or didn't belong at the time. And like, it's become so evident to me that I can't trust anyone, because even if I'm in a trusting relationship with a friend or a family member, um, eventually over time, it could be a month, it could be days, it could be years, that relationship changes and the trust has changed also. And I guess like, what is trust? Why is trust important? And do we really need to rely on trust? So for me personally, trust is connection, like connecting people. It's a reliable connection I have with someone. It's more than just a connection, it's a trusted connection. So that person would probably be someone that I could share things with that I wouldn't with other people, or I would do certain other things with. And I just don't, I feel sad and lonely because I'm now at this place where I've had too many relationships and friendships and family ships dissipate, and the trust is tethering and then it falls. That I'm just like, you know what? I'm just not going to trust anyone. And I don't like arriving at this place because it affects connections. And when I think about not trusting people, then that, for me personally, in my view, that's me putting a wall up. And I'm not a walls person, but is that a bad thing or is it a good thing? And if I don't trust people, is that going to make my life sadder? Like, will I feel sad about that? Or and if I can't trust people, maybe that's okay. But if it is okay, how do I make it feel better on the inside? Like, do I just put all my trust in myself? Um, I'm just worried about how it's affecting my personality moving forward, and whether or not I'm beginning to not believe in anyone anymore. And I don't want to end up there, but it's been a decade of some peaks of really good trusting relationships, and when they fall, it's just absolutely shattering for me. And I don't know if I can continue on this path. So I'd like to know what your thoughts are.
Okay. Well, thank you, Indy, for submitting such a vulnerable question, relatable question. Greg, where I'm going to start is the framework that we try and use on the show, right? What do you want? Why are you stuck? How do you get there? Okay. And so perhaps to frame things up a little bit, what do you want? What I'm hearing, Indy, I believe I heard her speak a lot about connection, right? So I get the impression that she very likely truly values relationships and connection. And of course, that arguably compounds the issue more so because she values these relationships so much. And then, of course, there is this present and past pain around losing those relationships. So I think it's clear that she values the relationships and what she wants is more meaningful connections, right? She's trying to work out how to be able to navigate that, but she's coming up against this wall, this belief system, and these patterns that perhaps, why is that happening? Which is leading her to feel stuck, which is the next tenet. Why are you stuck? Um, and we'll obviously get to that, but I think where I would start with sort of merging those two together. What do you want? Why are you stuck? Is you can want or value connection, but still fear the loss of it. Right. So there can be this confliction as we speak about on the show. We value something, but we also have associations, beliefs, past experiences that conflict with that. And, I'll throw it over to you to build on this perhaps, but very often based on the past experiences and these protection and these safety instincts we've got, what tends to happen is we tend to adopt short-sighted strategies. Yes, in an attempt to still fulfill our values, let's say with connection with Indy, but they are short-sighted strategies. And so what I would expect to find, and I see this a lot, believe it or not, and I'll give some examples in a moment, is that there is no way that this past pain, trauma, and let's acknowledge that for what it is, right? That is a big trauma around losing, your partner, your husband, and him passing away. But for the listeners, whether it's grief, whether it's having a loved one pass away, whether it's a relationship breakup, a friendship, etc., recognizing as I sort of speculate at the start of the show that what we go through will shape how we show up. And so what I would like to perhaps get Indy and anyone listening to reflect on is how is it actually shaping your behavior? And perhaps the most relatable example would be, I'm sure all of us can relate to a time of our life, often high school, etc., where we're sort of, there's this desperation to fit in, right? And, I've probably spoke about this before, but I know that I had a lot of challenges and identity and soul searching around, who am I and what do I value? Where do I fit in at college? And, perhaps like Indy, if I'm right in this, I truly valued relationships at high school as well. But the way I was showing up based on this fear of not having these relationships or this fear of not being good enough, I was showing up in a way that wasn't authentically me. And I was showing up in a way almost desperate to get the approval of others, right? And that might look like, I even remember actually very clearly, this is actually quite a comical thing to say, but I remember there was this girl I liked, and I remember her telling me, I like that. She's, my favorite band is this band. And I immediately thought, okay, I've got to go home and learn about that band and I've got to make myself like that band, right?
Yeah.
And that's just a little minute sort of comical example there. But I think if, we can all relate to that sort of thing. And so I think where I'd like to start, as I said earlier, how does our past pain of loss in whatever form that is in relationships, how has that changed our behavior? Which then is going to be, how are we setting up our own relationships unknowingly, perhaps not based on bringing our full self? Or perhaps another angle could be that perhaps there's so much pain or fear of loss that we just take breadcrumbs or we take what we can get. And again, we're not fully valuing ourselves in that relationship, and we're not setting those relationships up based on real foundations. Lot there.
Yeah.
Just some initial thoughts, mate.
Yeah. No, it's great. I think that for me, just looking at what Indy's saying that she wants and her current definition of trust is that it involves connection and connection and sharing and being able to share, I think, uniquely things that have a sense of privacy or you do unique activities together. There's a specialness about that connection and that trust. And I think I just want to affirm that that's a good thing to want.
Yeah.
That to want that. And it kind of goes into Indy's question around, should I want to trust or should I just trust myself? I think we're fundamentally wired for connection. There's a lot of content from Brené Brown and her research as well that shows that we are fundamentally wired for connection and that there's a lot of healthiness in that to experience fulfillment. So I would encourage that to be a good direction to be wanting that.
And just quickly, I won't take us off track, but also health benefits, right? I mean, it's very clear. I think the two main predictors of how long we live, one is muscle mass, interesting enough, but the second one is the quality of our relationships and connections that we keep in touch with.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, absolutely. It's got the practical part, longevity, but also that fulfillment. I think with connection, or you could say intimacy, and it sounds cheesy, but it's been helpful for me. Intimacy being into me, see, is that there's.
Say that again.
Intimacy. So connection and closeness being just intimacy, into me, see. So there's letting people into your world, and I can hear that with that. There's a desire to let people into her world and to be involved in other people's world. There's connection, and with that comes vulnerability. And I can hear that tension of going, I want connection, but this vulnerability is really risky.
Yeah.
And also saying, but I don't want to put up walls, but I find myself doing that. So I think we'll be able to dive into a bit more about that stuckness there, but I can definitely relate to having big moments in my life and having other people help me work out something happened. And then I told myself as a result, I had one coach ask me, what age, Greg, are you punishing? Because I was really serious. I was kind of being really serious. And I said, I struggle with joy. I struggle to let myself go. And I was like, I remember the joyful Greg. He was 16, 17. He was playful. He was this, he was that. And he said, and what did he do? I said, he trusted deeply and did. I at that time, I was fully committed in ministry at the time. So working with young people, but I burned out in that environment. And so I equated being joyful, being happy, being gung-ho, plus going all in and trusting equals danger, equals burnout.
Yes.
Let's never do that again. And as a result, I was like, what's the new path? It's seriousness. It's this, it's that. So just with you saying like, how is that behavior now shaping us? Took me years to realize, I've become really serious as a defense mechanism to not wanting vulnerability, because I said that was dangerous. So just relating with that in terms of your question of how is our past and what's happened unconsciously potentially shaping our current behavior. And for Indy, how might she be showing up in current relationships and friendships in a way that might be shaping those. Yeah.
I love the way that you put that, Greg. Almost what's the mathematical equation, right? Based on that past, first of all, what was the past experience, and then actually drilling down into, and this is obviously the purpose of the show, right? Uncover the why. What was the meaning that you made out of that event, right? 1 + 1 = what have you.
Yeah, my meaning being just unique to me, right? That someone else might have made created a different meaning, or for some reason I put those things together and said that happening means my path of safety moving forward looks like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And look, absolutely. And I'll add a bit more to that. And obviously, again, really core idea of the show, what is the root cause? Where do these patterns come from? Interestingly, we weren't able to include it today for the purpose of time, but I know that Indy actually left another audio note as well with a little bit more context. And I didn't particularly listen to, because we obviously like to have a real authentic response to it. But she basically just said to me very quickly, she said she wants to also add that she has had earlier life experiences as well. And, she didn't particularly give me any context around that, but it didn't surprise me, Greg, because very often we have a series of events that compound a certain safety instinct. And I wanted to point that out because obviously, and again, we've acknowledged it, the loss of her partner is such a trauma there. But there may be earlier life experiences. A couple of key words that she said that I thought were quite revealing that I wrote down, where do I belong, right? Where do I belong? Alone, a number of key words. And I feel very confident that there's some meaning being made, there's some associations there. And the reason that's important, again, going back to sort of what I hypothesized earlier, is, if there are certain fears of being alone or not being good enough, what is my place? There is really no way that pain point isn't going to shape how you show up in relationships. And again, just doubling down on this idea of ownership and, let's not that Indy was looking to do this at all. I didn't get that impression, but let's not focus exclusively on others. And, and I will speak in a moment on how we can perhaps audit the values or the actions of others, because of course talk is cheap. We need to look at others' actions and their values and the values overlap there. But I think also it's crucial to understand perhaps how are we showing up, much like the high school example that I gave, that might be shaping the relationship dynamics. I had a client recently, and he was telling me how when he first came to me, he described a pattern of whatever business he would start, he would find himself working with the wrong business partner. And that he's at a point now where he can no longer, he's doing it by himself again, and he's no longer going to do business partnerships. And I could tell there was something there, but I thought, okay, let's see where this goes. Let's look at everything under the hood, so to speak. And in the next session, he said to me, Hayden, my problem has always been I've been loyal to a fault. And the moment he said that, I just linked everything up for me. We're working on a number of goals together. And it became apparent to me that him putting this idea of, being loyal on a pedestal, basically, it basically meant that, he started this business partnership. And for this particular individual, it was very much, no matter what behaviors his business partner did or how he acted, no, I've got to be loyal. I've got to stay in this relationship, right? And, you're almost holding yourself to make this relationship or stay in this environment that perhaps isn't conducive to your values or isn't serving you, or perhaps it's not the most effective and fulfilling expression of your values, right? Because that's what we're looking for here, not just taking breadcrumbs, like I said earlier. And for this particular individual, their dynamic is that they perceived no one was there for them growing up. They perceived that their parents weren't there for them. And so, of course, that creates a pain point of, I do not want to be this person. I, of course, will go the complete other way. Remember, we talk about the extremities, right? We go from one extreme to the other as part of the protection instinct. And so he developed this unconscious pattern of basically, I'm not going to give up on people in my life,
Right.
regardless of what their actions are,
Yeah.
right? And again, we need to be able to look at their actions relative to what we want in our values. And I thought that was a good example for today, because obviously, how easy would it be for us to say, oh, being loyal is a great thing, a beneficial thing. And of course it is, but like anything, it's the degree that we get stuck in things. And so for this individual I was working with, all of his business partnerships and challenges, yes, again, we can put some ownership on the other on the other individual, no problem. But really it was, why is he entering into these business partnerships, and not really addressing actually some of the incongruencies, or not holding them accountable to their actions earlier, which is then it's actually creating or resulting those unmet expectations down the line. And then of course, that reinforces the actual fear.
Yeah.
So you see how it actually becomes a paradoxical position where the unconscious coping strategy is so short-sighted to avoid that pain, that in this example, it actually creates what we're trying to avoid. And I know that there will be a version of that for Indy going on, especially if you probably put the multitude of broken trust issues together over her life. I just wonder there'll be some incongruency of how she's showing up, or I'll throw it back to you, Greg. I can go on today. But she mentioned to me that people say, "Oh, I'll be there for you. Come around." All these things. Well, are they actually backing it up? Right? Is there a degree of, again, I use that word, infatuation or desperation. I'm seeking that because I'm seeking that at all costs, above everything else, above my own self-worth, above the evidence of how they act, because of that pain in the past. And so then she is projecting that onto the relationship, and perhaps not actually valuing herself or looking at actually their values or how they show up at the time. So a lot there, sorry, my friend, but that's
no, it's great. There are so many things in there, and I think one of the words that I picked up as well, that I think she said twice, was "there's been too many times," and this kind of like
exactly
keeping score on that, and saying that there's been so many times that she feels like that's been experienced. And so I think that, again, curious as to whether that is a repeating pattern, because there's something that's going on at that deep level, like you help get to that deep part and go, is there too many times? I'm sure there are multiple times where it's justified as in a break of trust, because there is some behavior, or lack of behavior.
Yeah.
And then also what part can be owned or have a look at. And then something I'm interested in your perspective about, some language from Indy. She said, I've kind of come to the conclusion and reluctantly that I feel like I can't trust anyone. And I don't know if you got any thoughts on that, but that stood out to me as some really broad blanket statement. I can't is like a totality. I just can't. And then anyone includes, everyone. So whether you've got any thoughts around, either from past clients or in this situation, that being a conclusion that we arrive at.
Yeah, look, I think, to be honest, it's probably just fleshing out a little bit of what I've already said. I mean, her having that language of can't trust anyone, yes, that obviously is going to be an exaggerated idea based on the psyche trying to protect her. But it will be telling, as you said, it'll be proportionate to the degree that she perceives this has happened in the past, right? So like I said, I think it's important, and especially for the relatability of the viewers, that perhaps they haven't gone through such a traumatic loss, but they may have had a lot of micro moments of broken trust in any sort of relationship, right? One thing that I want to make sure that I share today, Greg, or that I cover, is a bit of a practical reflection exercise here. Is perceptions deal off contrast, okay? And the way that I explain it is, if this whole, if our whole studio here was white, right? You were white, I was white, the walls were white, there was no shadows, it was all perfectly white, we wouldn't be able to differentiate or perceive anything other than the white, okay? It's in the same way where, people talk about, if there was no, evil, there would be no good, sort of thing, right? So it's only with contrast that we can perceive, right? Because we know what the idea of, stinginess is, let's say. We know what generous is, right? So we have this contrast. Now, one thing that I learned from one of my mentors is that in every second moment when we perceive, we are actually contrasting it to its opposite. So again, in an applied way, for us to perceive, so practically for Indy, for her to perceive in each moment of being let down or what we may call trauma that someone wasn't there for her or they broke her trust, she in fact has to actually be unconsciously contrasting it to moments in her life where she has been able to trust someone, believe it or not. And so a really powerful exercise is looking at where, first of all, I would suggest defining for Indy or for the listeners, where are the moments in your life where you might perceive that you have to define what it is, of course, but let's say that you were left or let down or not prioritized, whatever that is. So take a moment to define what specifically is the pain point that you're perceiving. And then what you want to look for is where is the opposite true? So where in your life is there a relationship, is there an individual who is demonstrating the opposite towards you? Okay. And oftentimes the first answer is, well, there's no one. There's no one else, Hayden. These were my people. They betrayed me or they left me. But the truth is, like I said, for us to perceive with this principle, we have to contrast it to its opposite. I'll give you a beautiful example. So I had a client and they had a lot of trauma around being alone, a lot of pain and trauma, and this idea of being alone was really keeping them stuck in the relationship. They were coming across very, I guess you would say, clingy or very, very dependent, and that was having negative relationship outcomes. And when we drill down in terms of where that comes from, or what is the most significant memory that really reinforces that, they told me a story of how they wake up on Christmas Day and their parents are drinking and drug addicts, and they're not there for them. There's no presents, etc. Very, very sort of bleak picture. And the question I asked this particular client is, I said, in that moment when you perceived that your parents weren't there for you, who was? And the first answer was, well, Hayden, there was no one. No one was there for me. No one else in the house. I didn't have any friends. I was very isolated, etc. And I challenged them on it, and it did take some time. It took a good 4 or 5 minutes of challenging them on it. So this isn't easy, but this is where the work begins, right? And what we found out is that whilst she wasn't there in that moment, this particular individual had a very strong relationship with their grandmother, right? And whilst she wasn't on the phone to her grandmother in that moment, or the grandmother, wasn't there on that day, she said that she just knew that based on all of the interactions she's had with her grandmother, that she was there for her. And if she was to call the grandmother up on the phone in that moment, the grandmother would be there for her. And in her perception, and this is where the balance is, of course, looking at both sides, the initial perception or the initial judgment is there's no one there for me. But then actually, if we look a little bit deeper, she's actually contrasting that to the grandmother is always there for her when needed. And so that was a beautiful sort of integration in a specific moment of trauma of there was no one there for me to my parents weren't there for me in that moment, but actually I did have this really strong, reliable connection with my grandmother. So one place Indy could start would be challenging this belief of, people, basically, you spoke about everyone, all or none. Challenging this black and white idea of people let me down, people don't prioritize me, people break my trust, and identifying the moments and looking at where is the opposite true. Because in each of these moments, if you challenge yourself, you will find that you're contrasting it to a present or past relationship where someone has been there for you and there has been a reliable question. So you could almost say that you're looking for it in the wrong area in that moment. So very, very deep reflective based exercise, and it's not easy, but I've never had a client that I wasn't able to challenge them on that. Where they're perceiving this, where is the opposite? It's true.
And for Indy, would she be able to do that with previous relationships where, in her own estimation, it was true until in her perception it was broken? Or,
Sure.
Could it be at certain times in just different relationships?
Look,
where have you experienced that?
Yes, look, that is true, and that is a good point, because I don't want to imply that these people necessarily are there for her forever.
And it could also help with the, what do you want to be true? As in, what is the picture of trust that you're wanting?
Yes.
I'm guessing if you're saying, well, it was like this, and this is what I really valued about that,
Yes.
is to go, is there a fantasy or a belief that it will always be like that?
Absolutely.
And you can find that in, well, when things started, it was like.
Yes. Yes.
it was like
So,
this.
so this exercise here is solely for the purpose of changing those all or none beliefs,
Yeah.
right? All or none beliefs around no one's there for me, or I consistently see this. So it isn't necessary. We're not necessarily looking for where is, as you said, where is this fantasy of this person that I forgot about that's always been there for me?
Mhm.
It's not necessarily. It may be that, but not necessarily. But it's where it's, you could say, when there's challenge, where is there support?
Mm.
Where is there someone who is breaking your trust? Where is someone recently gained it,
Mhm.
right? And integrating those complementary opposites will start to break those protective instincts, because again, those protective mechanisms are based on this black or white idea that the trust was broken. Okay, so I would love her or the audience to start there. Again, it's a very deep exercise, but I think you'll get as much out of that as you apply it. The other aspect, which we'll quickly cover, Greg, is that in terms of relationships, people aren't loyal to you; they're loyal to their values, or they're loyal to how a relationship with you supports their values,
Mhm.
right? And that might sound a little bit un-PC or a little bit selfish, whatever you want to label it, but that's the truth, right? I mean, oftentimes we do, again, there is exceptions, of course, like the client I shared with the business partnerships, where arguably he was not being loyal to his own values of his business because he was caught in this pain point of trying to desperately hold on to that relationship. But outside of those specific patterns, generally speaking, we are loyal to our values. As in, you could say that I have, with a bit of like a great relationship with my partner, Krista, well, we both share a similar value and vision on what we want for our family. We both share a similar value and vision for, whether it's spirituality, health, etc. And so whilst we don't have to have the same values, we are both fulfilling our values and have a shared vision together. If I was to say to her tomorrow, I'm no longer interested in having a family, or, I'm going to become an alcoholic, whatever that is, some really clear behaviors that hugely conflict with her values, I would imagine that would be a problem in the relationship, right?
Mm.
And so I think perhaps for Indy, again, we're sort of coming full circle here, looking at other people's actions, not projecting this fantasy onto them or pain points of who you want them to be, who you're desperate for them to be, or what they say, but looking at their actions, okay? Their actions aren't really good or bad, right? That's your own labels. They're not good or bad, but their actions are proportionate to their values. And so not looking at what they say and understanding that people are loyal not specifically to you, but to their values. And again, making sure that we are setting up relationships that are based on your authenticity. We've sort of covered that, but also the other person's authenticity. And the only way to do that, because people don't know their values, generally speaking, is going to be looking at their consistent actions. So, interesting that she said people, I'll be there for you, etc. But I think perhaps not getting ahead of ourselves, not jumping the gun, being careful of, like I said, that pain, perhaps past pain driving a little bit of almost a desperation to cling on to that perhaps.
Yeah.
And just taking it moment by moment, seeing what the actions represent. And then for Indy or the listeners, looking at where the relationships that you're investing in, not only based on your values, but based on others.
Yeah, some great thoughts there. It's made me think of a quote by a guy called Dietrich Bonhoeffer. He says, this is paraphrased, but he says, those who love their ideal of community more than community itself will ruin that community through their ideal. The idea of kind of, if you have a super high standard of, community needs to look like this altogether, and you come in and you start judging everybody based on that ideal, you won't have genuine community, because every relationship is based in judgment. And I read that and found that true of my friendships as well. I was going, my friendships need to look like this. And if they don't, well, then I'm not that interested. So instead of, and what it stopped me from seeing, and I wonder if this might be something that's helpful for Indy as well, is it's almost like you're saying, people are not loyal to you, they're loyal to their values. Is, I fundamentally think people are broken and they're going to let us down. So what do you do with that? Because it seems like in hearing what he said, there's things are going well, they're going well until they're not. And then trust is broken and it's gone. And if there's an expectation with eyes open in reality that they're loyal to their values, I'm going to let them down, they're going to let me down. What will I do when that happens? And I'm interested if you got any thoughts about that with, going, okay, they're loyal to their values, I'm loyal to mine. When these conflict or when this doesn't, like, how do you keep trust going in a way that is not all or nothing? Because all or nothing is, like we see, really black and white. Do you have any thoughts around, like, need to be willing to lean in, have a conversation, renegotiate? Is the relationship changing? Is it just a mismeeting of expectations? I mean,
absolutely. I'm going to give you some thoughts, but not in that area.
Right.
Okay. So I think, I mean, for the purpose of time, and look, you and I have spoke about this as well, Greg. You know, we obviously have the alternating format that we've developed. You know, the breakthrough in depth, where we can actually go practically. You know, how can we give listeners the tools, or in this case, the communication strategies to have those hard conversations, right? And ironically, when we were sort of looking at what could that format be, I think I said to you, perhaps a great topic, just as an example, would be how to navigate difficult conversations in relationships. So I'm going to save that one, and let's have it where in the next 2 or 3 episodes, let's cover that so we can actually do that justice, if that's okay.
Yeah, totally.
But I will say, I want to go back, your quote there, if the listeners need to go back a second and re-listen to that was, I've almost never heard such a relevant quote to what that was absolutely on point, that almost that attachment to the community can then have the opposite effect, or
based in idealism as a means of, and it can be seen as altruistic, like I just want what's best.
Yes.
I want what's good. Like,
yes.
I just want everyone to be great.
Yes.
And
exactly.
then it ends up being
so
the
that
opposite of what you
attachment
want.
to that comes with these conditions, it comes with these emotional triggers, etc. And as we've talked about, when you are more so congruent with your values as opposed to these past pain or seeking or avoiding dynamics, you tend to have a different level of resilience and adaptability and resourcefulness that doesn't come with those same conditions. In terms of your other question there, you touched on the conversation piece, which we'll circle back to, but what can she do? Well, again, it's going to come back to actually getting clear on identifying and living her values. So clearly there is a value on relationship or connection, and we've discussed today everything that might be in the way of that or can conflict. And so I think there's a lot of wealth there for Indian listeners to start defining what those fears and patterns are, more specifically, how that's affecting you. But also, ironically, in taking action on your values and other values outside of the relationships, not only will you build your self-worth and will that be so much more sustaining and give you direction, but would you not be so much more likely to actually find the right relationships that have similar or supporting values through living your own? For example, if I want a partner who values health and fitness, am I going to meet, that individual at the nightclub, or am I going to meet them perhaps at a wellness center or a gym, so to speak, perhaps, if you sort of catch my point.
If you find them while you're living your own.
Absolutely. So I think there will be a lot of unconscious dynamics that we've touched on that lead Indy towards a certain prioritization in relationships from perhaps the wrong energy, and perhaps redirecting some of that back, at least for now, more so towards her other values, not only will be the most fulfilling to her long term, but will also probably, ironically, increase the probability of her finding the right relationships and supportive ones based on both her and their authenticity. All right, I've covered a bit of an extended episode today, my friend, and I feel like we've almost covered the sort of key ideas, breakthrough insights near the end there. But let's recap breakthrough insights. I feel like I've recapped my key ideas there, Greg. So I want to hear from you. Breakthrough insights, moments, key takeaways for you, and we'll call it there.
Yeah, I think for me, where you were sharing the story about a previous client that was experiencing a pattern of the people that he went into business with and said, I'm loyal to a fault. I found that both relatable and as a sort of breakthrough insight that we can call something good and almost be a martyr with it, to a fault. And it's just who I am. I'm so loyal.
I always forgive.
Yeah, it's just, and realizing that can have the opposite side of it. That is big blind spots or a way that we're showing up. And also the idea that if we fundamentally change the way and the energy with which we're showing up, that can flow into our relationships and environments every day, as opposed to here's some tactical strategies. It's who we are, how we're being, how we're seeing. So some really deep work as you take us into. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, love it. Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Breakthrough. A bit of a deep, always deep, but perhaps a bit of a deeper one today. I'd love to hear, obviously, the subscribe as per normal. Please support the show. But if you've had a bit of an insight, bit of a reflection, bit of a breakthrough moment of your own, please let us know. That really is meaningful to us. So let us know in the comments what resonated, what you loved, etc. And we'll see you next time. Thanks.